What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Chop and Brew. I am Chip Walton, and happy Mead Day Eve. Woo! That's right. Tomorrow, Saturday, August 7th, 2021, is Mead Day to celebrate the awesome holiday of Mead weekend. We've got an amazing interview for you. It's part two of our six-part series, B-Jam, aka Better Judge a Mead. In this series, Mead Maker of the Year Josh Holbrook is talking to a roster of Mead luminaries, and we're dropping a video each Friday in August and actually one into September. He's also tasting a mead with each guest. In this case, I'm also tasting it. I ordered the Schramm's Mead Blackberry, and I did the taste along as I was editing, which was a real treat. So, cat's out the bag. Spoiler alert. This week's guest is the one and only, the godfather of mead, Ken Schramm. If you don't know who Ken Schramm is, he's been making mead at home and on a pro level for 33 years. His book, The Complete Mead Maker, is like the tome of mead community, undoubtedly launched thousands of new home mead makers. He's the founder of Schramm's Mead, and he's a founding member of the Mead Institute, which you will hear Ken talk a good bit about throughout the interview with Josh. He also served as the very first competition director for the Mazer Cup. Ken Schramm. Y'all about to get schooled. He and Josh talk about everything from achieving balance in a mead to what balance even means, fruit preparation, honey character, advice for new and seasoned judges, and what the future of mead looks like. They also sample and talk through the judging notes for Schramm's Mead Blackberry, which I'm enjoying now, and you can order for yourself to enjoy for a virtual taste along when watching this video. I had a lot of fun doing that, and I really hope you enjoy the conversation and tasting ahead. Check it out next week. Josh talks with friend of the show, Steve Fletty, about everything from structure in meads to bigger philosophical ideas like owning your bias as a judge. Be sure to subscribe to Chop and Brew's YouTube channel and ring that bell to get all notifications for new videos dropping. Josh and I want to wish you all a very happy Mead Day. Please tell us what you've got going on to celebrate. What are you making? What are you enjoying? What is it about mead that you love so much? Put that in the comments below, man. Tell us what's going on Mead Day. Before we get our B-Jam on, I got to let you know that Chop and Brew is brought to you with ongoing support from Imperial Yeast, whose year-round strains, Flagship and Darkness, have been known to ferment some pretty nice mead. And of course, the Patreon party people. These are the busy little bees that keep this hive a-buzzing. Join them in helping out the show at patreon.com/chopandbrew.
All right. Tonight I have Ken Schramm with me from Schramm's Meadery, and certainly a man that needs very little introduction when it comes to the mead world. So I want to thank you for being with me, Ken, and we're just going to kind of go through our discussion and talk about mead judging.
Terrific.
Awesome. So why don't we dive in? A lot of times when we talk about mead in a judging scenario, we're talking a lot about balance. Can you talk to me about how you think of balance in mead?
Sure. Well, there are a number of constituents to mead that can be balanced with each other. I think most people would start with the precept that the acidity and the sweetness have to be in balance, but balance can occur between lots of different things. In beer, for example, it's between malt and hops and carbonation and mouthfeel, density. There are a lot of ways that balance plays out in beer. Balance in mead can be between sweetness and acidity, but it can also be between fruitiness and body. It can be between other adjunct flavors, the amount of spice, for example, that's used in a metheglin, or between spices in a metheglin. If you're trying to make metheglins with multiple different spices in them and trying to allow the taster to get them all and to perceive them all with sort of an equal sense of importance. That's one way to look at it. I am not a true believer in the notion that balance always has to be perfect equilibrium. In a lot of other beverages, in IPAs, hops are not necessarily perfectly balanced with the, especially American double IPAs. The balance is between lots of hops and a moderate amount of malt. The same thing is true in Scotch. If you're drinking a Lagavulin or a Laphroaig, there isn't even balance between the amount of maltiness and nuttiness and the amount of smoke. No, there's just a profound amount of smoke, and the balance in that instance is it's not on a teeter-totter. The fulcrum is way over on one end, and so that the same thing can occur in meads. I think the key is whether or not the overall impression is enjoyable, and the finish is something that leaves you hopeful for your next sip. That to me is as key to the description of a mead as being balanced as it is, equal parts A, B, and C. That isn't necessarily that may be balanced, but it may not always be as pleasant as if you actually present something a little heavy-handedly, and it's beautiful. So balance is, to me, is in whether or not I set the glass down hoping to pick it back up again soon.
Sure. Yeah. And I think I like the way you put it. It makes you want to take another sip, because I'm curious, if I'm sitting down to judge, how do I recognize when something is out of balance versus maybe it's just not to my preference? Like if I'm drinking a hot pepper capsicum ale, maybe I prefer it spicier, but that's not out of balance. Do you have a recommendation for how to differentiate that preference from, is it in balance?
And that, therein lies the huge challenge. Judging is a process of being subjectively objective, and in some regards, judging is very much at the core of a lot of some of the craziness that's occurring in our society right now. There's always been a lot of Sturm und Drang over who gets to decide. And as a judge, you are placed in a position of having to make evaluations about meads that sometimes people aren't going to want to hear, and that's something that you have to learn to phrase appropriately so that the message gets across, but it's not caustic. But the questions that you're asking about, how do you frame judgments in a round, can be as simple as being honest with the entrant about how pleasant that mead was in comparison with the other meads in the flight. And you can say this was an attractive mead, but it was outshone by other meads in the flight. And if that's honest, and it should be, then you've expressed to them that they've created something that's, you can say it's enjoyable, but it was not as impressive as some of the other, as its competitors. And that's a way that you can, I don't want to say get around, but that's a way that you can express that what they've created is attractive, but not perhaps as attractive as it could be.
Sure. I think the overall enjoyability, like when we're talking about BJCP judging and we're writing this at the bottom of the score sheet, I know I've had a hard time when I've been judging and switching from this very like dissecting each individual character, and then at the end I have to kind of take this step back, this zoomed out view, and how enjoyable is this? And that's
right.
It's easy to miss the forest for the trees if I'm so focused on that nitty gritty, but I still have to step back and how does this sit overall?
Some of the best judges that I've ever worked with, and some of the people that I can honestly say that I learned from, were religious about keeping all of the meads in the round, in the flight, on the table in front of them for the entire judging session. And there is an inclination, I think, in a lot of competitions now to ask people to judge each mead individually and to fill out the score sheet and then to dispense with that mead and move to the next one. And that's not, as far as I'm concerned, that's not the most effective way to create an accurate set of impressions about the mead in the round. For me, it's really important in terms of evaluating the quality of a mead to understand how well it evolves over time. Beers are very, very different from meads in that regard. When you get a beer, it's going to be at its peak when it hits the table. The aromatics are going to be where they're supposed to be. The carbonation is going to be where it's supposed to be. And the temperature is going to be perfect. On the other hand, meads are intended to be, and this is similar to wine, they're intended to be beverages that can be consumed with a meal, for example, and will continue to evolve and express themselves differently over 30 to 40 to 50 minutes. And if that's as long as your flight is, then you will find out how the addition of air into the glass changes the profile of the mead. How it does it gain in attractiveness over time, or does it fall apart? Does it kind of disintegrate, or do its aromatics become flabby and does its mouthfeel lose that edge? That's important. And so those judges would put all of the meads in the flight in front of them, and they would return to them repeatedly throughout the flight and bubble sort continuously. Bubble sort meaning, well, this is the best mead in the round, and I like this one next, and I like this one next, and this one next, and this one next. And that's a very effective way to make sure that the best mead in the flight is the one that proceeds to the next level. And it's also a great way to make sure that there's always going to be some subjectivity in it, but if you've got to present 3 meads to a mini best of show or to a next round in a large competition where there are 8 flights of melomels or 8 flights of metheglins, then you can be sure that the 3 that you're going to push on are in fact the ones that have the best set of characteristics.
I've tried doing that once or twice myself when judging a flight of mead to keep them around like that. And I know judges that do that, like you're saying. The only pitfall I ran into there was when I had one mead that was unbelievably aromatic and distracted from the judging of the current mead.
Sure. I mean, it would be tough. It would be tough if you had leatherwood in your round. It would be extremely difficult. Although one thing that you can do, I mean,
there are ways.
There are ways, and I have in fact judged a lot of rounds where I'll do this. I'll take a sheet of paper. I'll just take blank sheets of paper with me to the competition, and if I've got 8 meads in the round, I split the paper into 8 sections, write the entry number on it, and I move it around with the glass, and do the same thing with sheets of paper to put over the top of glasses if the aromatics are too much. Sometimes it can. I mean, let's face it. There's sometimes that people are sending meads into competitions hoping to figure out what I can do better next time. And sometimes those aren't fun to have sitting open in front of you for the whole round. But
yeah, no kidding. I'd like to talk to you about fruit character in mead. I
Sure.
think you're probably uniquely qualified to talk about this. It seems like fruit quality and growing fruit horticulture is a real passion of yours. So I'm curious your take on what fruit characteristics are desirable versus undesirable in mead, and are there some universals, or is it all subjective to a certain style what you're drinking?
Well, for me, in terms of what we're going to make commercially, it's entirely subjective, and I'm shooting for fruits that have a high level of acidity and a large amount of flavor impact. So there are some fruits that are out there that are, we've never worked with watermelon, and we've never worked with cantaloupe, and we've never worked with a number of different meads because they don't fit into that category of lots of bang for the buck and a high degree of acidity. I'm a fan of sweeter meads. I'm not gonna. Anyone that's had our Schramm's lineup knows that I like that, but I also like our meads are sweet because we're playing with dynamite. Traditional wine grapes have really low levels of acidity by comparison with raspberries and blackberries, and when you get to currants and red and black currants, now you're into levels of acidity that the wine world looks at. And just when I told people what the actual levels of acidity are in some of the strains of black currants that we're using, the wine people's eyes just bugged right out of their head. What? Yeah, 80 grams per liter of acidity. That's just outrageous. They're talking about 6 and 7, and we're playing with fruits that have 80 to 100. That's more than lemons. So yeah, so we like that. We like fruits that have lingering aftertaste. But getting back to there was another part of your question that talked about, are you looking for fresh? Are you looking for, what specifically are we looking for? And really, we're not necessarily looking for fresh. Wine is the combination of those grapes and then what are called the de novo characteristics, the things that arrive out of the fermentation, right? And in that can be anything from small amounts of diacetyl and ethyl acetate and all kinds of other things that are wonderful in tiny quantities and sometimes offensive in large quantities. But it can also be it's a tremendous maturation of the flavors. So they're not identical to what a fresh fruit is. And beyond that, you're gonna change the profile of the thing by adding some honey, and then also, how much? 6, 7, 12, 14% alcohol. The profile shouldn't necessarily be fresh fruit. If you want Welch's grape juice, just drink the Welch's grape juice. The game here is to turn the fruit into mead, and not to turn the mead into fruit. So we're cognizant of that. They have their similarity in what we call fidelity to the fruit, but it is not just a mirror reflection of what the fruit was like before. It can't be the mirror reflection of what the fruit was like before you added a bunch of honey to it and then fermented it to 13% alcohol. It's going to be a little bit different, but it's got to stay true to that central set of characteristics. I am not a person who is, we've chosen what we're going to do with Schramm's mead, right? And we're doing full flavored, full bodied fruit meads. That's not to say that I don't like Zombie Killer. I do. I like I like a lot of, Kurt Stock makes just terrific, light, fresh, frequently carbonated meads that they're just eminently quaffable and totally delicious. I do like the fidelity part that I like is knowing that I'm a fan of real fruit. I like real fruit. I'm not a fan of the stuff that's been processed a lot, because the only processing I want to have involved in the transformation of those fruit flavors into what's in your glass is what occurs in the tank, in our tank, when we take the fruit and the honey and put it all together and do our punch downs and do our pump overs and then separate the fruit from the mead and let that settle in a secondary and a tertiary tank. That's what that's the approach that I'm interested in, because I like to have those elemental notes that come from fruit. I like to taste a little bit of the raspberry pip. I like to taste when you use real blackberry, you get a little bit of the core of the blackberry in there, as well as the rest of the blackberry, and you get all of the dimensions of the fruit. And if you're using extracts, there's no process that I know of for making a concentrate or an extract that doesn't leave some of that stuff on the floor. There's no way to, cryovac the stuff, and to remove all of the water and not remove some of the aroma and some of the flavor. You can say that you're going to try and put it back, but you're going to put it back after you heated it up and vacuum processed it. I mean, it never comes out tasting like the fruit when you put it in your, the whole piece of fruit when you put it in your mouth. All of and I'm not saying exactly like that, but all of those elements aren't there anymore. When they get transformed somewhat, but that's what I like. I like the full plate of complexity that you get from using fresh fruit.
I'd be curious to just put a scenario out there. If you were sitting down at a judging table and say you're judging berry meads, and say you have a hydromel session strength light carbonated, let's say cherry mead, and then your next mead that you have is a standard or sack strength cherry mead. Do you think that there's different fruit character that you're expecting in one style versus the other, and whereas one type of fruit character might be appropriate in one of those versus inappropriate in the other?
I don't know. I really don't know. I have had a lot of. I mean, if you take Kurt Stock's meads, he's doing a great job with those, and he's doing a great job of maintaining fidelity to that fruit, even if he's not turning the volume all the way up to 11. His don't go to 11. But if the volume of the fruit at a 4 is delightful, and you're balancing that with carbonation, and you're balancing that with a really attractive and beautifully represented honey. The last mead competition that I judged a best of show round for, it was one of those meads that won, and I don't have any qualms with that. I don't think there's any problem with picking either one, as long as it is doing what it is trying to do as well as it can possibly be done.
If one of those lighter carbonated fruit where the intensity is maybe not so high up there, what if that fruit is a cooked character? Do you see that as a negative?
Yeah, yeah. Yup. I mean, I'm looking for, when you say a cooked character, overripe or turned into something like fruit preserves or jam, yeah, I would probably knock that a little bit. There are some things that, I mean, some people will claim that you need to cook elderberries in order to make them eliminate whatever it is that makes people's stomachs upset when they drink it. I've that doesn't affect me, so I don't I don't know, but I don't really for the most part find the. I mean, I'm not trying to make cherry pie. I'm trying to make cherry mead.
What about a style to look at the further end of the spectrum? If you're looking at like I haven't had a lot of Polish meads, but I can imagine like a raspberry Polish mead. It's unlikely to have the same fruit character. So I'm just curious about how style dependent the fruit character is, what you're looking for.
And in Polish meads, frequently you're dealing with very different honey varietal selections than are used in the U.S. You can be dealing with a raspberry mead that's been made with buckwheat honey in Poland, and so it's going to be very different. Once again, I'm gonna look for and Polish meads are frequently intentionally oxidative. I'm just going to look for whether or not that's pleasantly oxidative or offensively oxidative. Like I said, I'm going to try and balance in my own judging activity my inclination to say that I really like this or I don't like this with the evaluation of, is this an accurate, well-made portrayal or the term that's being used now in the Scotch world is expression. Is this a great expression of what the mead maker was trying to express?
Yeah, I like that. I want to talk about fruit preparation or addition methods, because in the same way that I believe there's biases out there toward certain fermentation or backserving processes or whatever it is that need to be overcome with certain judges. I imagine there's similar biases or preconceptions about what type of fruit you're using or when you add it or how you add it. So for example, if you're using fresh versus frozen, steam juiced, whether you're adding in primary versus secondary, if you're doing a no water type melomel. So in a judging scenario, if you're sitting down and you have that cup in front of you, do you think meads with those different methods or styles of addition are distinguishable? And if not, I mean, are there desirable or undesirable characteristics to look out for?
I haven't judged a set of meads now. I've only judged one set of meads in the last year, and you know, I'm more concerned with what's coming out of Schramm's mead than I am what's happening at pro-am competitions. I do have a strong preference for the stuff that's done with either fresh or frozen fruit myself. I would love if we could work with fresh fruit all the time, but when we're making something like a Smile of Fortune, for example, we're working with fruits that are harvested over the course of 2.5 months. So it's, unless we do that strictly as a blended cuvee, where we ferment the individual, ferment the black currant separately, ferment the Lutovka cherries separately, ferment the raspberries, ferment the boysenberries, ferment them all separately, and then blend them together. It's not possible to do that without using frozen fruit. If you're going to try and do a co-ferment, at least some of that fruit, if not all of it, has to be frozen. And furthermore, to get that fruit right now to get that. And we're not allowed, for example, we're not allowed to use unpitted cherries. The TTB won't let us do that. It's just not, can't do it. And if you're going to get pitted cherries shipped to you from, when the Lutowkas come from Poland, you're not going to get them fresh. You're just not. There's no way to get that done. So it's unfortunate, but we have to do that. But we look for fruit suppliers that are able to provide us with fruits that are still really true to form. For the home mead maker, it is possible, and it's possible to do all of that stuff. That's the one thing I will say the major thing that I miss as a commercial mead maker is the ability to do the kinds of things that it's possible for an amateur mead maker to do. It doesn't matter to them if this tank is full for, they don't view their tanks as real estate that has to be paid for, but that's just our economic reality. I can't be tying up tanks for months at a time without it affecting whether or not I have enough money to pay the health insurance and the salaries, right? That's just how it works. So yeah, in a perfect world, if I was an amateur mead maker right now, I would love to be working with exclusively fresh fruits, and also have the ability to do what I know a lot of mead makers are capable of doing, which is to say, I'm going to ferment each one to perfection, and then I'm going to blend them to perfection by taking the time to sit at my kitchen table with little eyedroppers and a magnificent Riedel tasting glass, and just literally whittle on it until it's perfect. That's a magnificent luxury. And so, yeah, I think in the world of amateur, am I one of those people who would love that? Oh, heck yes. And in the world of amateur, I think it is possible. And I think honestly, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think here's the one caveat I will say. There is a temptation to just simply take concentrates, and because of what you talked about earlier, and there is a tendency of some judges to just say, oh yeah, that's bigger, and so therefore it's better, and so you can take concentrate and and just jack a mead into utter fruit oblivion. It has. You've removed all the water from the fruit, and so you can take concentrates and create meads that are just syrup. And some judges may be willing to say, yeah, sure, that's fantastic. I think it's an obligation on the part of judges to start thinking about whether or not that might be what's going on, and start looking for those characteristics of real fruit, that little bit of twigginess. It's what Dan McConnell used to call twigs and dirt. I want the twigs and dirt, right? And he taught me how to taste Burgundies and say, look, they're using whole cluster fermentation. There's some stems in there, and it's cool. That's that little green, slightly green woody edge on the back end of the palate, and it's wonderful. And so I think judges do have something of an obligation to begin training themselves to not just go for the big, vote the big.
To not get distracted by intensity, to appreciate breadth of fruit character.
Yep.
Talking still about fruit addition methods, do you think fresh versus frozen translates? Are they distinguishable in the glass?
It depends on the fruit. I think, and there are some fruits that are just remarkably difficult to work with. Strawberries, yes, I think you can tell the difference between fresh strawberries, and we've had success now. The only thing that we've had success with strawberries, and this is courtesy of Dave Anderson, is fresh strawberries, no water added. That's how We've been able to capture the essence of the fruit and be able to deliver it up and have it show up and last in the glass too. Because strawberries are notorious for being there for the first 4 months that the mead is in the bottle, and then just Elvis has left the building. They're gone, and Dave's managed to capture a mead that's got all of that going on and staying. So yeah, there are some differences that are fairly recognizable.
Nice. Yeah, the few strawberry meads I've made, I've cheated. I've done hibiscus or
Right.
a small amount of black currants to
Sure.
boost acidity and color.
Yeah. And as long as you're honest about what you're doing, I don't care. Just be honest. That's my theory.
You're not going to turn me in.
No. The other thing I want to comment on is that, let a thousand flowers bloom. It is, and okay, so this is going to sound a little bit egotistical, but before the complete mead maker came out, I don't remember anybody ever talking about adding fruit in the secondary. That was a trick that I came up with in my basement and I published in the book, and now it's a really popular thing. But I don't remember anybody ever saying, hey, why don't you put the fruit in the secondary? And now there's this big, sort of debate that goes on about, is it better to put it in the primary or is it better to put it in the secondary, and blah, 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 blah. And we have economic realities that say, keeping a primary busy for twice as long so that I can put a second round of fruit in it doesn't necessarily make sense. The TTB doesn't really like that. You have to leave it in the primary fermenter, because of the way the recipe formulation restrictions have been laid down to us. You can't take it out of the primary fermenter and then add another round of fruit. So there are some I don't want to, it's not semantic, but there are some nitpicky aspects to that are interesting. But I am myself not as big of a fan of putting fruit into the secondary, just because I like what happens between the yeast and the fruit and the honey. All three of those things come together, and I'm a fan of a lot of red wines, white wines, and even I mean all beers and all distilled beverages they're done, Scotch and bourbon are done by having that fermentation and the interaction of the yeast and the elements push all the way through to the finished product. I like that. I like that approach to it. I try not to, and I've judged a lot of meads since the book came out that had post-secondary fruit additions into them, and it's really easy to get what you talked about earlier, that true fresh fruit character, because there's the yeast isn't acting on that. You're just extracting fresh fruit flavor into the mead with a post-secondary or a post-primary, a secondary fruit addition. So I mean, I guess it's a little bit of what you want, and that's, as a judge, there you go. There's your question of being subjectively objective.
Yeah, I feel like that segment should be labeled "In Defense of Primary Fruit Additions," because there's probably something to be said for when we're talking about yeast and fermentation and the alchemy of fermentation. There's probably something to be said about providing more of that fruit substrate for the yeast to work on, and there's umpteenth research studies on the fermentation effects on grapes, and very little probably on raspberries, blueberries, blackcurrants.
Absolutely. No, we're way behind. The world of melomel, the world of melomel is probably, my estimation is 70 to 80% of commercial mead right now. It's probably 70 to 80% as well of amateur mead right now. And we're way behind in terms of our knowledge of all aspects of what occurs during the fermentation, all of the agricultural practices that have to be adopted to maximize quality. The grape people, the cider people have done some of it for apples, right? They know. Those people, they're growing specific varieties to ferment. The Arlington Mills and the Michelins and those varieties that are used in cider production, they've been grown specifically for fermenting, and they've been reared and treated, specifically to try and maximize quality in the glass after it's fermented. But the same thing is not true of blackberries and raspberries and black currants, and there's just a whole world of knowledge that we've got to accumulate, and then what actually happens during the fermentation and afterwards.
Yeah, excellent. I want to talk about honey character and melomels. I've heard, it's been a long time since I've heard this comment, but some, like, let's keep picking on Kurt, because Kurt Stock is, he's gone through his phases of very intense, strong, fruit forward, sack strength, sweet meads. But I think he's also been known for wonderful session melomels as well. But I've heard him talk about early on in his competition days that a lot of his melomels would get knocked for being more of a fruit wine instead of a mead. So what should judges be looking for in terms of honey character?
That is an educational process for the judge. And what the judge has to understand, because a lot of people are saying, oh, this is just a fruit wine, and they've never tasted that fruit wine. They've never tasted a raspberry fruit wine or a cherry fruit wine that was not made with honey. And so when they say, oh, it's got all kinds of cherry character too. Yeah, it does. It's got a lot of cherry character, but it's got plenty of honey character. And if you were to set the two glasses in front of you, the one that was chaptalized with good old-fashioned white cane or beet sugar, and the one that was made with honey, and asked it to say, okay, well, which one's got honey in it? They would get it right 100% of the time. But because they're in a competition where all of the things contain honey, and some of them contain large amounts of fruit, it's easy to dismiss the fact that, oh, the honey character is perhaps somewhat subdued as compared to the cherry character or the black raspberry character in this mead. If you were to taste it without the honey in it, it would be dramatically different. Dramatically different. But because they're judging it outside of that frame of reference, or in many instances completely absent that frame of reference, because they've never tasted a cherry wine made with no honey in it, their initial inclination is to and there's one of the issues for me with judges, to say the thing that sounds really witty and brilliant. Right? Well, that's great. It sounds really witty and brilliant, and it's wrong. So just leave your inclination to try and say the smartest thing that anyone in the round is going to say aside, and try and be honest about what's there. One of the things that judges don't do is empty the glass. And if you are confused about whether or not there's honey character in a melomel, get to the end of the glass, pour all the liquid out, or pour the liquid into a different glass, and smell the glass. There it is. There's the honey, right there in your face, undeniable, completely evident. And now you put the mead back to your nose, and oh yeah, yeah, it's there. Yes, it is.
Do you feel like you personally had tasted a melomel before that you feel suffered from lack of honey character?
I'm not all that convinced that I have tasted something that suffered from a lack of honey character. I am loath to criticize somebody for using as much fruit as they want to make it taste delicious. The honey is there. I mean, one of the big problems with mead and honey, period, is that honey can be a fairly delicate substance, right? There are some honeys that are so rich in sugars and light in other character that when you ferment out all the sugar, there's not all that much left there. So that's the one thing I would say is, and that's why we use orange blossom instead of some really sort of innocuous wildflower honey. We like honeys that have distinct character on their own, and we want that to be left when the sugar, or the majority of the sugar, has been fermented out. So
I guess to put you on the spot again, do you feel like you've had a melomel where the varietal of honey clashed with the fruit, where you thought it was, boy, this wasn't a good choice?
Yeah. I'm not going to get into specifics of that, but yes, okay. Absolutely.
Okay, nice. So to talk about mead judging in general, I kind of want to, I know you've said there are a couple things that annoy you. I want to hear you let loose, Ken. So what other judging habits or tendencies drive you nuts? What do you want to see people are doing that need to change?
I want to see people fill out a score sheet comprehensively and completely, and not change it after someone else at the table begins talking. If you're a judge, you are supposed to be subjectively objective, but you're also supposed to be able to completely fill out a set of comments that are meaningful and true to form to what you tasted and recognized in the mead. Don't wait until other people on the table start saying, well, I get a note of this and I get a note of that. Well, you didn't, or you weren't good enough to figure it out when you were actually writing your comments. So don't add it after the fact. Let the other judge that did and maybe got it accurately get the points for having identified whatever character it was that you maybe failed to recognize. The other thing I think is important is to not talk until everyone's score sheet is completely filled out. Don't smell things and start commenting immediately. Don't begin commenting on the mead as you're working your way through your score sheet. Let everybody fill out their score sheet, and then when you're done, if you want to talk about it, that's fine. Mostly what you got to talk about when you're done is making sure that your scores are within the range that the competition organizer is saying is appropriate. But get yourself a language chart, which we'll talk about. Get yourself a language chart. Get yourself a set of prompts if you need to help you fill out a score sheet comprehensively, and then do the best you can, and don't be influenced by others. And the other thing I think that's important is the behavior of judges needs, if there's to be credibility to the whole mead judging world, the behavior of judges has to be at the highest standard. There can't be all of this walking around tasting other people's things and trying to figure out whose this is and who entered that and what all. That's not in any way helping the credibility of the mead world. That is harmful to the credibility of the mead world, and it's also perpetuating really bad behaviors that have to come to an end in order for the real quality of this activity is developed and spread. Table talk is fun and harmful. The other thing I would say is that there's a lot of that question of who gets to decide is frequently the cause of behavior that can be difficult to be involved in and can take some of the joy out of the judging activity. People take ownership for meads. They take ownership for my mead in this second round, and it's really important then to do the same bubble sort activity. For example, if you're involved in a mini best of show or a best of show, to not want to advocate on behalf of a mead that came out of your round. That's just bush. I'm sorry, it's bush. You have to be as objective in every round as you were in the first round. And if that means not having your mead that came out of your round advance, well, that has nothing to do with the point of the competition, right? Having your mead that came out of your round that you're now, you've somehow adopted ownership of, advance. That's not what the game should be about.
I think there are documents in like the BJCP program that discuss ethics, but I think it's due for updating to address things that are happening right now. And I think one of the videos we're going to be doing is going to focus almost exclusively on ethics from an entrant's perspective and a judge and like an organizer. So at each level of competition participant, what are bad habits that need to change? What are unethical things that need to change? So it's a discussion we're going to have.
Absolutely, it needs to be had, and it needs to be had unapologetically. The credibility of the mead world is more important than people's individual ego-related issues.
Yeah, and so considering that a lot of judges, like their first experience in mead judging oftentimes is having already been an experienced judge with beer and maybe done that for a few years, but say they get seated in a mead flight and it's their first time. Do you have any specific advice for those people?
Spit. Get a spit cup. Don't get yourself blasted before you get through when you're 4 meads in and the mead is starting to affect your judgment, you're no longer a judge. So spit. I mean, mead judges have to become accustomed to that. It's just completely de rigueur in the wine world. And in fact, if you go to a meeting of distributors and wine buyers these people are walking around and tasting some of the finest products in the world, and they're not swallowing them because they have an obligation to their employer, to their customers, to everybody to remain as clear-headed as they possibly can, even in the face of the fact that what you're doing is you're spitting out the taste that you just got out of a $450 bottle. Yes, you do that. You do that because that's what you're supposed to do, and
I think
spit.
We need to get accustomed to it because, I mean, even for me, I've been around the judging scene, homebrew judging for 10 years. The number of spitting or spit cups I've seen at a homebrew competition, beer, cider, or mead is 0. So
you got to spit. Yeah. Take your own sleeve of solo cups. Nice red, nice blue cup that no one can see through, and learn to do it, because I mean we at Schramm's Mead, it's the corporate policy. You don't drink while you're working, and even if you're tasting to evaluate, spit, because we need everybody at the top of their game all the time.
What advice do you have for mead judges who may have been doing it for a while, but they're looking to improve better? Do you have any advice?
Oh yeah, sure. Go to Z Specialty Food Company, or go to Schramm's Mead, www.schrammsmead.com, and order yourself up a whole variety of honeys. Learn to identify by aroma and taste. Learn to identify 25 or 30 different honeys. You're going to run into more than that, buy a bunch of commercial meads. Go to Schramm's Mead and buy a bunch of commercial meads. But also go to other places like Bee Nectar and other places. People in the beer world are religious about doing that, right? Before I became a beer judge, I had I could probably find it. It's right here in this bookshelf behind me somewhere. But I had a list of all of the beers that I'd ever tasted, and it kept growing and growing and growing and growing. But that was how I learned what the different styles were, and what the commercial standards were. And people can do that in the same, as mead judges as well. It's a little more expensive. I mean, yeah, it is more expensive. Mead is more expensive to make than beer. A lot more expensive to make than beer. You're educating your palate, and so yeah, do as much tasting as you possibly can. And the other thing is, work on your own aroma and flavor language chart. It helps to. There's UC Davis has a mead flavor and aroma wheel. The Mead Institute has its flavor system, and I would strongly recommend going to the Mead Institute, looking up the Mead Institute on Facebook. Sign up for our newsletter, and we'll be providing people with resources to help them with their tasting experience.
Excellent. I think that's a great challenge for anybody who, I don't even have to say that you'd have to be passionate about mead, but whether you're a mead maker, you've helped at competitions in the past and plan on in the future, or if you're just a fan of mead, I think that's a reasonable gauntlet you've thrown down, is order some honey sampler packs, get your hands on varietals and get used to them, and work on your vocabulary.
Sure. I mean, as you become more advanced, I strongly recommend that people spend time at, find if you're in the northern states, if you're in Indiana, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, anywhere on the East Coast, you're within a 3 or 4 hour drive of an orchard that grows 40 or 50 varieties of apples. Go there in the fall and taste them. Taste them and learn what the differences between those apples are like. Start to think about the differences in acidity, the differences in mouthfeel, the differences in aromatics. One good thing that I would strongly recommend, and this is another part of the Mead Institute that we're going to be working on. I conduct a seminar on the constituents of mead, right, which helps people to understand what dextrose tastes like as opposed to fructose tastes like, as opposed to maltose tastes like, what citric acid tastes like, what malic acid tastes like, what tartaric acid tastes like, what gluconic acid, the acid from honey, tastes like. They're all different. They're all in there. You will find out that, and then what we do is we go through and taste different honeys. So if you want to understand what a honey that's high in fructose tastes like, as opposed to one that is high in dextrose, as opposed to one that is high in maltose, you'll be able to begin to parse that out and become familiar, on not just book learning, but with your tongue and your brain all meshed together. So that's another thing that you can do.
Nice. Yeah, I think those are great suggestions. Any other comments before we drink some mead?
I'm thirsty.
All right. All right. We have some lovely mead in front of us. Do you want to talk about what we're drinking, Ken?
Sure. I have opened a bottle of Schramm's Blackberry and poured myself a glass. I'm not sure exactly if we've got the same batch, but we've gotten pretty good at consistency with this product. The guideline that I'm going to use to try and do this tasting is the one that was developed for the Mead Institute. I've got my printed version of it is the one we use for blind tasting at Schramm's. But it's got an entire protocol to move you through the tasting process systematically and to help you present your impressions of the mead by making it kind of, I don't want to say formal, but formulaic would probably be the better term for it. We started with appearance. With beers, and some, certainly for sparkling meads, it can be important to get the nose first. But the need to get aroma comments taken care of quickly is not as important with a mead like this. On the color, I'm kind of at a bit of a disadvantage here because I'm not in a perfect well lit scenario. I'm in the library and not in a kitchen, but this is a clear mead. I wouldn't say that it goes to brilliant, but there's a spot on the area for color description, and one of the things you want to do is to put a light underneath it, or to take the glass and tilt it over a white background, and there's a little bit of golden note in the rim, called rim variation, but I would describe the color of this mead as dark in purple into near black, although it is clear, and the viscosity I would describe as medium to heavy.
So how are you differentiating those viscosity levels?
Well, certainly one of the session meads you were talking about would be light. You can see that there is a pretty substantial set of legs on this mead, and the legs are slow to begin to move back down the glass. So that's what I would put in the medium to heavy.
Okay.
Trying to get my phone to stop making noise.
If not about this mead, but if you had a cherry mead in a judging scenario, and if you were to see like browning in the rim, would you consider that a negative?
I don't know if I would consider it a negative. It would depend. I mean, that could be just a sign of a very mature mead, and light absorption of oxygen into a mead over the course of, say, 8 or 10 years is going to occur in the bottle, and it may present the faintest hint of oxidative note in the aroma or the taste, but you may not even be able to perceive that. It may just come across as rich and mature, and still and have some slight rim variation. So no, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily bad. So in terms of maturity, I would say that this is probably in the category of developing. I've smelled and tasted some blackberry meads that were even more rich and obviously aged. This is, and part of this isn't blind for me, and I know how old this mead is.
Okay.
So I'm cheating a little bit, but similarly, though, there are some very woody and vanilla notes that will come out of this mead as it gets older, that are still kind of bright and stemmy at this point. Those will round out and become a little more giving.
So woody and stemmy is a character that you're expecting from blackberry.
Sure. I mean, as I said, this is made with lots and lots of real blackberries. When you buy blackberries and just eat them out of the container at the store. They have a slight woody stemmy quality from the pith that's in there, and that should be in there. So yeah, it's not unattractive. It's not unexpected, but that is one of the things that will soften and age out. I would say that this is moderate to powerful in terms of its intensity.
It tastes, or it smells. I know you can't really smell acidity, right? But it gives
Correct.
a acidic aroma impression.
Yeah. What you're talking about is something that is profoundly human, and it's one of the things that if you are part of a Mead Institute Elements of Honey evaluation, you can't smell any of the acids. We make 5% solutions of malic, tartaric, citric, lactic, and gluconic, and you can't smell any of them. They just are completely scentless.
When the wine world talks about volatile acidity, are they talking about acetic?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and what you're smelling in acetic acid is a lot of the process of creating acetic acid. It's not a pure
in itself. It's not interesting.
Yeah. But humans associate the smells that they get from lemons and limes and tart berries, currants. They associate that with that mouth-watering experience because it's just like Pavlov's dog. You know when you smell that it's going to be there on your palate.
Well, the same happens with sweetness, right? Like I think it smells sweet, right?
Yep. So which fruits would you identify in this?
I got to go to my handy dandy language chart.
Sure.
While I'm peeking at my fruits, can you elaborate on developing on that term?
Sure. And this is very much this comes out of the wine world, although I believe people in the beer world will understand this as well. If you get a Belgian beer that's brand new, it's going to have a lot. It's going to have a sharper, hoppier aroma. The yeast is going to come across as more tart and doughy, as opposed to cooked bread, which you're going to get, as a Belgian beer then ages. If you get a Cinq Cents or even an Orval. The developing is when all of those characteristics that you are familiar with in really fresh beer are present and pushing themselves forward. The same thing's going to be true with meads. You might get a little more fresh fruitiness instead of something that's got a melded character from the yeast and the fruit together, and also some of that herbal edginess will soften. So when you still got that, we call that developing. Then you have youthful, which is like right out of the keg. Developing, meaning it's begun to change from that brand spanking new mead to something that's more like a mead that's 3 or 4 or 5 years old. And then mature is going to be one of those meads that is 4 or 5 years old, and then past prime is going to be a mead that's got some oxidative notes to it, or has begun to kind of become pruny or the past prime.
Okay, I think I'm definitely in like the purple dark fruit category. For me, I'd say a little Aronia, because like the Aronia I've had, I get some earthiness, and I'm expecting a lot of tannin, even though I'm not there yet. But it reminds me of some Aronia that I've had, but definitely like a real punchy, acidic like purple berry, like a black raspberry or something like that.
Yep. No, I mean the black. It doesn't have black raspberries in it, but it has that black raspberry, smoky, earthy note.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean you're right where I am.
You get. I won't interrupt you. I'll let you continue on your grid because I was going to ask about secondary characteristics.
Yeah. Well, I would add specific fruits and fruit character. I would describe this as fresh and ripe. I don't know as I would describe it as tart, baked, dry, jammy, or overripe. I don't think any of those are accurate.
No, it wouldn't. For me, it wouldn't be on that end of the spectrum.
Right. From the spice world, even though I know there's no spice in this, if you said, is there a little bit of sandalwood? Is there a little bit of vanilla? Yeah, there is. Right, so I would put that in there. Spice under spice, I might put the vanilla. Under herbal, I might put sandalwood. I would say it tastes like it's fresh. Aging and wood use doesn't have an obvious oaky note to it to me. Doesn't seem like it has been oaked. But in the other non-fruit, I did already comment on smoke. I would also say that there's a little bit of yeast and lees. And in terms of the earthy non-fruit descriptors, it's got a little bit of umami to it. Maybe just a touch of that sort of mushroomy character.
Yeah, I get a little bit of almond. Do you think that would be the yeast character?
Yeah. No, that can be coming from the fruit as well. Yeah.
Maybe some black pepper.
Here's me telling people that they have to spit, and I'm drinking right now because it's after 9.
Well, and I don't know what you're doing after this, but you're probably not lining up a flight of 6 of them.
I'm not. I'm going to go outside and see if the tree that I tended is still above 32 degrees. Structure and mouthfeel. This is obviously not. There's no carbonation to it at all. I would say that it's probably medium to medium plus in alcohol. I wouldn't say that the alcohol is. It doesn't come across as hot on the nose, but it is obviously alcoholic.
Yeah, medium plus. You definitely smell it.
Yep. Acid, I would say probably also medium to medium plus. Probably medium plus.
What's your preferred method for gauging acid?
How much does it make the underside of my tongue activate?
Yeah, I like that one. The tip I got was letting the mead like kind of sit below your tongue and just feel how much you're salivating in the rest of your mouth.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm also cheating hard because I know what the acidity of this fruit is, and it's really high. It's as fruit goes. Tannin, I would say medium minus. There is some tannin in blackberries. It comes from those from the skins and from the pith of the fruit. It's medium minus because if you swish it around in your mouth and try and move your teeth across each other, they get a little sticky. Not really sticky, not like you just chewed some rhubarb sticky, but a little sticky.
I don't have a lot of luck with the people call it like the bunny rabbit, like move your lip up and down and feel that friction against your teeth.
Yeah.
I haven't figured that one out yet. I can sense it when I move my tongue around my mouth, just like how much friction there is around.
Yeah, I just do it by rubbing my teeth together. Bruxing, as they call it. Do they feel a little bit sticky?
Well, there's some, but I mean, it's not like a blackcurrant aronia. It's something that's really knocking your socks out.
Yeah. So I said medium minus, or you could even put low, but it's not none.
Yeah, I'd be in the medium somewhere there.
Yeah. Bitterness, I would say none. Sweetness, I would call this sweet. Body, I would probably go as far as to say full. It fills up the tongue pretty well. If you consider how much, and I do, how much of your entire tongue does this engage? If you put a small sip in your mouth, make sure it goes all the way through your entire mouth and swallow. It engages the whole tongue. So yeah, I think this is pretty good. Complexity, medium plus. Finish length, medium plus.
What character would you describe in the finish? What does it leave you with?
I think the most profound thing is blackberries are noted to me. The one part of the taste that we didn't really discuss much is that I get a little pininess from blackberries all the time. There is even one variety of blackberries that's called evergreen, because it has that piney thing going on in spades, and we use some of that in this mead. They're in the blend. There's a specific blend of varieties that we use, and there's a little bit of evergreen in there, and so that's the one. I mean, you can call it vegetal. You can you could call it woody, or you can just call it herbaceous, but it's there.
Yeah, I definitely get more of the non-fruit stuff hanging around in the finish, like the earth and the smoke.
And the acidity.
Yeah.
For me, the acidity lingers. I can still feel that tartness on the bottom of my tongue long after I've swallowed it. In terms of its age, I would say this is the glass that I've got, which may be from a different batch than the one that you've got. I would say that it's probably about a year old.
So, given that most of us haven't made as many batches of blackcurrant or blackberry melomel as you have, how would a judge look at gauging the age on a melomel like this?
As I said, when the mead gets older, the acidity will soften, the vanilla notes will become more prominent. You'll almost get sort of a brown sugary character to it. It will lose some of that kind of greenish note, the piney note in the nose, and it'll become, I hate to say this, probably a little jammier, a little more like compote, and less like a fresh juice.
Sure. I might have missed it. How'd you describe the honey character?
I'm going to cheat again because I know it's done with orange blossom. And I'm going to really cheat because in this glass, I have Nebbiolo.
Oh.
Which has no honey in it at all.
Sure. So at every berry mead judging session, there should be some Italian wine present.
Some Nebbiolo, yeah. Just keep a glass of Nebbiolo around. Yeah, it adds what one of my other friends used to call throatiness.
Richness, maybe.
Richness. It has a little bit of the florality of the orange blossom honey is there. It is secondary to the fruit character, but it's there. And there is just a tiny little bit of the creamy But if I was going to really be particular about it, this is the point. If I was going to try and analyze the fruit character, this is the point where I would pour this into another glass and smell the empty glass.
Sure.
And that will make very evident what the honey character in this mead is like.
Yeah. I mean, it's helpful when you declare orange blossom, because when you know what you're searching for, I mean, it can start to pick it out of the nose a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like a real top high note. It's like really in that mid range with a little bit of savory. Like,
yeah,
that's where I'm getting it. But
it's almost a little bit lemony. And some of the honey that we get, all of the citrus fruit honey can be declared orange blossom.
Sure.
And sometimes I wonder how much of it is actually lemon.
Yeah, I know when I've gone to Florida, I've been tempted to try to see if you can suss out more specific citrus blossom honey.
Mike Fall with his Malia is that's one of the really interesting meads out there, because what Mike has done is bought honey from a pollinator who is putting his bees right in the middle of an orange grove, and he is taking those specific colonies and extracting them and selling the honey to Mike. So he knows it's not the orange blossom that he is getting is Valencia orange blossom specifically, and that's a pretty cool thing. I think there's more of that to be done. I think if you're looking at what's going to be the future of mead, it's going to be really cool relationships between honey producers and mead makers to try and deliver up the fidelity to the honey that is possible, and also to help the customer understand, like I said, what those exact honeys smell and taste like, and then how that translates into a mead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems especially like small to medium size honey producers, this is kind of their competitive advantage, right? Is to really recognize art for like true varietals.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said for having the mead community recognize that its strength is in its small size. In that, the fact that we are tiny and we're not being called upon to deliver up, tankers full of Bud Light, means that we are able to do things that huge scale producers can't do, just because they have to have consistency and volume. We can be small, we can produce things that are regional, and we can make things that are really hip, and capitalize on the fact that we're small, but we're good. You know.
Well, and mead has a huge potential to tell the story of terroir, right?
Oh, my goodness.
Honey's potential for that is incredible.
Oh yeah. I was talking with a reporter today about that. Honey's almost got ultimate max terroir, because it's got all the terroir of the environment. Then you got the terroir of the bees and the beekeeping practice. It's because terroir is a blend of, in wine, it's a blend of, this is what this place is like, but what the place is like is also the result of what humans have done to the place in Burgundy for hundreds of years. How they've treated that soil, and how they've influenced the way that those vines can grow there. Because what was there originally wasn't grapes.
Right. Well, because with grapes, right, it's dirt and weather, right? That's most of terroir.
Well, yes and no. I mean, people, if you're accustomed to terroir and you look at it in terms of, well, this is what Beaujolais tastes like. Well, there's also a whole set of human behaviors that occur in Beaujolais. There's all kinds of standards of winemaking that are pretty much unique to Beaujolais that contribute to the way that those grapes reflect themselves when they hit your glass. So there's this big human component, as you know, and in addition, it's human in that, we elected to plant the grapes this way and to prune the grapes this way and to do our canopy management this way. That all ends up being reflected in the glass as well. And those are human practices, not exclusively dirt and weather.
Right. True. I think honey's so interesting because, I mean, rather than some of those factors, it's more just the plant makeup of a geographical area, right? And like the radius of forage that the bees are going to collect from. I mean, not to get too nerdy, but my beverage I've been enjoying while we're talking is a traditional mead that I made from honey from my beehives that I keep at my parents' house where I grew up. I can sit there and I can drink the distilled down nature of the environment where I grew up. I don't know.
Yeah, but there's all kinds of things that go into that terroir as well for the honey. The bees consume water, right? They drink. They're animals, and so they drink the water at the location that you're at, and that affects what their gut biome is like, and that affects what the flavor of the honey is like. And as well, the rainfall and it is the water soaked through the dirt that ends up back in the nectar. All of that stuff goes into it. It's just, the amount of tremendously influential characteristics is really cool with honey. I mean, it's just really cool with honey. The inclination of the bees to, maybe hit this one floral source as opposed to this other floral source for one period. It's fascinating.
Well, any final comments on this delicious? This is great. It's actually my first time having this. I really appreciate it. It's a really great mead.
Here's my comment. The bottom of the sheet is applications and recommended pairings. If you have a place where you get brisket, do you like barbecue? Do you like brisket? Try this mead with barbecue. Try this mead with beef, because it's just a magnificent pairing. I strongly recommend anybody that's interested in trying it. It's blackberry. It's one of our products that we make on a regular basis. shop.schrammsmead.com. Hop on there, pick up a bottle and pair it with some beef, especially some grilled or barbecue beef. And if you really want to get specific, try it with some brisket. It's a match made in heaven. It's also terrific with chili. I know it sounds silly, but it's just a little plebeian, but it works really well. The thing I would encourage people to try and do is, this isn't one of our most expensive meads. It's not cheap, but it's not one of our most expensive meads. And try it with food. Specifically, put it with a meal and see how well those flavors work together.
Yeah, the intent of how we've been choosing meads for some of these other videos we're doing is making sure that they're relatively available for people, trying to avoid a lot of really specific niche one-off things that are really difficult to get your hands on, because we want people to be able to taste this while you and I are tasting it. We'll just make sure that because we'll try to put out a list in advance of these videos so people have a chance to pick them up before the videos get posted, but we'll put a special note with yours that requires brisket.
Yeah. The comment I would make about blackberry, a lot of people look at there are people in the, deep into the mead community who look at the stuff that's in our quote unquote standard lineup, the statement ginger, blackberry, raspberry, and they look at those meads and think, oh, that's just the regular, that's the plain stuff. I've tasted these meads up next to some really, other meads that are perceived as super premium, and this is quality and fidelity, and we think we're doing a pretty good job at hitting it with this blackberry.
Yeah, if you want to talk about expression, how you had mentioned before, is a hell of an expression of blackberry. I mean, there's a lot going on there.
Yep. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. So I appreciate your time, and I guess thanks for jumping in on this.
It's been my pleasure.
Yeah.
I think we're at the front. We're still at the front end of a phenomenal mead thing.
We just want to keep moving it forward.
Thank you, Josh.
All right. Cheers. Thanks, Ken.
Cheers.